And it was only having 5 of us together trapped in one pew, the lock on the door, so we couldn't get out if we wanted to, that really forced us to confront this idea that, well, we all had multiple degrees. I had the fewest number of degrees, and I have 2 of them. And I'm like, if the first 2 weren't enough preparation, why do we think the 3rd is going to be? Or the 4th, or whatever? The way to actually do stuff is by getting out there and doing it. So if you're having the thought like, I just need X first, that's worth doing this. This process called the work is just a way of examining your thinking. This is not a way of changing it necessarily. Although, if you decide your thinking is wrong, it seems that this will catalyze changing anyway. I use this with my clients all the time. It's very conversational. And here's the way it works. And you have this on the work of Byron Katie sheet. You write down the beliefs that are causing you stress. So in this case, you write down the excuses, or the things that are holding you back, or the things that are depressing you. I'm too old, I'm too young, I'm too tall, I'm too short. There isn't enough money, there aren't enough donors. I can't charge the high enough ticket prices, yada, yada, yada. The theater market is shrinking. The theater market is aging. Young people aren't getting into theater. Too many young people are getting into theater. There's no way to serve them profitably. Whatever your stories are, you write them down. The reason you write them down is because otherwise they will change as you're doing this technique. Because your brain is very slippery. It does not want you to be able to undo the hard work that the narrative brain has done to construct the excuses to keep you in your current conception of reality. And so you write it down so that when you start to go like, wait, what was I doing that again? You can look down and get back to the exact wording. So let's do it with an example of, what's one that, I'm gonna use the, they have connections. They have connections that I don't. That's my excuse for whatever my thing is not succeeding. So I write that down. They have connections that I don't. And then all I do is I ask 4 questions about that. Now the key is I want to ask the 4 questions and really go inside to find the answer, not just give an immediate flippant answer. Really stop and consider. The first question, is it true? Is it true that they have connections that I don't? That person who got cast in the lead again, they have connections that I don't. Is that true? Yes. And that's just a yes/no question. Yes, I really believe that's true. If you answer yes to the first question, then go on to question number 2, otherwise skip question 2. Question 2 is, can you absolutely, positively know that thought is true? Okay, can I positively, absolutely know that they have connections that I don't? Yes. They're friends with Cameron McIntosh and I'm not. So they clearly have connections that I don't. Question 3. How do you react when you believe that thought? Well, when I think that they have connections that I don't like them. I try to talk down about them at parties, but really subtly so no one will notice. Say, oh, yes, that person is really wonderful at what they do. Of course, they know Cameron McIntosh. And I use that very thought to try to take away from their achievement. That's one of the things I do. When I think they have connections that I don't, I get angry at them. And I think to myself, life isn't fair. When I think they have connections that I don't, I feel like this tightening in my chest and this little sense of hopelessness and despair. Like, there's just nothing I can do, right? Because that thought that's a victim thought. So a thought I have no control over, right? They have connections and I don't. That's not my control over. How else do I behave when I think they have connections and I don't? I think that covers it. I belittle them. Oh, in my mind? In my mind, I throw them off a pier. I have fantasies about making it so that they don't have the connections anymore, so that those connections will have to come to me instead. Oh yeah. Okay, so all we've done now with question 3 is we've examined what effect does that narrative have on our lives. Because remember, our narratives are typically what we act on. You have to do these questions in order, by the way. I've tried this, I've experimented. This is a very linear process. You will get it will not work as well if you do it in any other order. Question 4 is, if this narrative is producing that result in your life, what would happen if you didn't have that narrative? So who would you be in the exact same situation, with the exact same person and the exact same things happening, if you did not have the narrative, they have connections that I don't? Oh, well, without that narrative, I would be thinking they're a nice person. I might even go up and talk to them. I might go up and talk to them and then we'd become friends and they'd introduce me to Cameron McIntosh. Huh, that's interesting. Well, what else would I do if I couldn't even have that thought? Well, if I couldn't have that thought at all, I'd feel better about myself because I wouldn't be comparing myself to them. When I talk about their work, instead of talking about their connections and belittling them, I would just talk about the work. I'd be able to address it directly and maybe learn something from it, or maybe if I can, it would be for quote unquote real reasons as opposed to artistic reasons, as opposed to just being my sublimated desire to have their connections. And how would I feel without the thought they have connections that I don't? I'd actually feel pretty good. I wouldn't feel like a victim or whatever. I would just feel like like me. That's question 4. Who would you be without the thought they have connections that I don't? Then you want to examine the opposite of that belief, and you want to come up with 3 examples for how the opposite could be true. You don't have to believe the examples, but they have to be plausible to you. You have to believe that at least these might be as true as the earlier one. The first is the direct opposite. They have connections that I don't. The direct opposite of that is they don't have connections that I don't. Come up with 3 examples of how that could be true. And you might have to rack your brain for this, because you are literally asking the brain to do the exact opposite of what it's believed up until now. Well, let's see. They don't have connections that I don't. Well, okay, realistically speaking, I'm on LinkedIn. I bet that I could find my way to Cameron McIntosh if I really tried. That's one way. Another way they don't have connections that I don't is that I don't even know what their relationships are like with these people. Maybe Cameron McIntosh thinks that person's a total idiot. And that person just doesn't know it because they're too self-absorbed. Ooh, okay, I'm gonna have to write that down and do that one next. But that's another example of how maybe it's true that they don't have, it's not true that they have connections that I don't. And then a third example, they have connections that I don't. They don't have connections that I don't. You know what? It's the flip side of the one about Cameron McIntosh. Maybe they don't actually feel close at all. Maybe they just met Cameron McIntosh once at a party and they don't feel like they have any relationship at all. And I'm just projecting that whole thing. So those are 3 examples of the direct opposite. The next is you want to flip the subject and object. They have connections that I don't. I have connections that they don't. Oh, sure, I can think of that right off the top of my head. I know my right hand, and they don't. I know people from my Harvard Business School career, and they don't. I know people from my hometown, and they don't. Very easy to find turnarounds for that. And then the third is you turn it all around to yourself. And this one is usually where a lot of the power is, but again, you have to go through all the rest of this in order to really get the power. Otherwise, you can just end up criticizing yourself, depending on what the belief is. So the original thought was, they have connections that I don't. This is then the turning it all to myself is, I have connections that I don't. Well, that doesn't exactly make sense, so the way I'm going to interpret it is, I have connections that I don't know that I have. Could that be true? Well, when I decided that I wanted to do my one-man show, I told a 10-year business associate of mine about it. I said, I've discovered this bizarre love of musical theater, and I am doing this one-man show. Who knew? This is so far outside my comfort zone, I'm not even scared about it, because I can't have any ego attachment. It's not even me, it's this other artistic scheme. And my friend looked at me and said, oh, that's really wonderful. I've done a lot of theater. I said, oh, you have? And he says, oh yeah, I direct 6 or 7 musicals a year. Excuse me? He's like, well, that's what my degree is in. I said, I thought you had an MBA. He's like, no, my master's is in directing. Wow, maybe I do have connections that I don't know. You want to know the real kick in the rubber parts? As I was talking to my aunt who lives in New York City, saying I'm coming up to New York, blah, 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 for this theater thing, or coming down to New York for this theater thing. And she's like, oh, you should come see one of my plays. Like, one of your plays. She's like, I'm a playwright. And I said, when did you start being a playwright? She said, 1964. I never knew. So I have another connection that I don't know. And so on. That's the whole technique. You write down the thought, the excuse, the thing that's holding you back. You ask, is it true? Can you absolutely know that it's true? How does it affect your life? Who would you be without it? And then you find examples of the turnarounds. And the interesting thing that happens is the next time you have that thought, it doesn't hold you back. And I don't know why that works, and I don't know how it works, but it does work. And if you want more information about it, I mean, this has been the most transformational thing I've ever found, and I use it whenever I think anything is frustrating or hurtful. Byron Katie has a book called Loving What Is. She has a gazillion audios, and in fact, if you go to her website, which is thework.com, she even has, you can download like big chunks of it for free. You have to hunt around a little bit, but all the important stuff you can download for free off the website. And this is an explicit way of getting your narrative self to get out of your way when it's holding you back because you have beliefs that aren't the ones that are really going to empower you, and the owner beliefs that are going to let you move forward. So I want to just share one last little narrative, which is, as I said before, you guys are all residents of Path 2. You're the path of follow your heart, and the money may or may not. Follow your passion, and the money may or may not follow. And whoever came up with that phrase, follow your bliss, and the money will follow, or whatever, what is it? Follow your bliss, and the money will happen. Do what you love. Now, that's wrong. If that were true, everyone would just go do what they loved.